Good afternoon, Professor Vogel.
Good afternoon.
It's a privilege to be able to have this interview with you, so thank you for taking the time off your busy schedule to do this.
Yeah.
So let me start with this. You researched extensively on East Asia and particularly on Japan and China. So maybe I'll begin by asking what sparked your interest in looking at the East Asian region?
It was not interest in the place itself. It was a sense of what was useful for development of social science research. When I did my PhD at Harvard, it was an unusual department called social relations, where we tried to combine sociology, social anthropology, social psychology, clinical psychology, all in one discipline. And one of my teachers, who was very well known at that time, this is already 60 years ago, was called Talcott Parsons. And he was perhaps the most famous theorist at that time in sociology. And he always believed in taking a very broad view. He wanted to understand an entire society and to understand the economic structure, the political structure, the social structure, and the underlying values in that society. And even in a smaller group, he felt you could look at analogous issues. And so when I thought of a country, I thought of all those broad issues. He was very much influenced by Max Weber, who was a very broad thinker. And so that was the kind of training I received. So my PhD thesis was on the American family. And I tried to understand the American family in terms of the broader cultural context and social structure as well. But then when I began to think about what to do after my PhD, one of my teachers says, "You don't know enough about other countries. You're too provincial. You've never been out of the United States. You were born in a small town. You don't know the outside world. How can you understand your own society without having a broader perspective? You must go abroad." And she suggested Japan. And it was for social science reasons, because if you look at Africa, they had such a different economic structure, or most Asian countries then. But Japan was a more modern industrial structure. So it was interesting to see how a country with a different cultural background dealt with similar issues in modern society. So I got a 2-year postdoc to spend in Japan. 1 year was full-time language study. That wasn't enough, but it was a good start. And then I did interviewing of families in Japan for a year. When I got back, I began teaching, and I visited some of my former professors. And they said to me, "How would you like to study China?" I said, "Never thought about it," but while I was in Japan, I began to feel that I was more interested in Japan, understanding Japanese society, than the American family. So the professor said, "We have a new grant from the foundations. We want to train sociologists who can work on China." Until that time, America had not really begun to look at disciplines in different countries around the world. But with the new global responsibilities after World War II, there was more interest in training broadly. And so money was available to train some sociologist who already had his PhD to learn about China. And so I accepted this grant for 3 years and did 1 year full-time language study, and then also began, not full-time, only half-time. Harvard did not have full-time study. So I worked on language, and then I began reading history and politics and other works about China. And when I got through, Harvard said, "Okay, we'll give you a chance. You can begin teaching, and if it works out, you can stay." So it worked out, and I stayed. So it was not from particularly liking those countries. I was trained as a social scientist. Some people talk about arranged marriage, where you first have arranged marriage, and then you fall in love. It's not love marriage where you have love first and then arrange. I had an arranged marriage with Asia, and then I found it was fascinating and enjoyed very much. I went to Japan in 1958, so as you can see, that's 55 years ago, and so I've been working on Asia ever since that time.